So what I'd like to do is, we found that there are a lot of people who've been reading a lot about this thing, but there are a lot of misconceptions out there in terms of what it does. So I'd like to talk about it in 3 different steps. One is where we are, you know, in the timeline of things that are happening, where the reg is, where the circular letter is, the imminent inception date or effective date of the regulation. 2 is I want to talk about the 4 squares and what actually the regulation does. And then 3, I want to talk a little bit about the implementation of the circular letter. The timing is a little unusual in terms of the 3rd part of that presentation because the circular letter we actually expect will be the 2nd draft of the circular letter, which may actually be the final draft of the circular letter, is expected to be released maybe as soon as this week, maybe as soon as next week. It's imminent, it's coming up very quickly. It may resolve some of the issues and the questions that we have going forward with respect to how to implement this thing in your agency, which is the ultimate end result, how we're going to implement this thing in your agency. So with that basic framework, I'd like to just kind of walk through a little bit about where we are, how do we get here, and you know, and what it seemed to have died down after that. And then it came back up a little while later when the Senate Assembly took a look at this thing and they said, well, wait a minute here, let's look at this big contingent commission thing, because, you know, in the eyes of the layperson, contingent commissions seem like a bad thing. And they investigated it, and they looked at it from a legislative perspective. We were involved, we testified, and we met with them. Then it went away again. This is one of these things that comes up like a bad penny, like that proverbial bad penny. A couple of years ago, we started getting wind from the insurance department that they were interested in this thing again, out of the blue. Just again, contingent commissions are a bad thing. So where are we now? The regulation went through a number of different iterations. We changed the regulation substantially from where it was to where it is now. Okay. Originally, you remember, it was outlawing contingent commissions, and it was giving them the dollar figure of your commissions right from the get-go, whether they ask for it or not. Every client that walks into your office, and they were talking about taking away your contingent. Okay. Where it is now, because when I go through the actual regulation, your eyes are going to go, what are you talking about here? Because there's so much stuff. What it is effectively is simple. Okay? It's a 2-part process, a bifurcated process. It's a primary disclosure and a secondary disclosure. There's subs for each one of those, but let me just give you the 10,000-foot view of what we're talking about here. Primary disclosure, required to give it out on all new policies. Existing disclosure, what do I need to provide? This is an issue here. That's a very simple issue, but one that people have, I think, a lot of misconceptions on. And they think right off the bat from primary disclosure, I got to tell you how much I made. And that's not the case. There are 4 important points as the primary disclosure and what we have to do. The primary disclosure piece that we put together, we drafted here internally in the PIA, and we actually walked down to the department in one of our meetings, put it in front of their counsels, and said, read through this and tell me if this is okay with you. And then they said, yeah, that's okay with us. Well, we're going to go one step farther. We're going to officially submit it through the process, the formal process for an OGC opinion, which we did. They then officially came back and published their opinion, the OGC opinion, that says this compliance document for primary disclosure that PIA drafted is in full compliance with the regulation. They've essentially given you a safe harbor on this thing, or they've given us a safe harbor, which we're giving to you. So you know what? Don't worry about these 4 points anymore. Take what PIA did and be done with it. And you'll never have to lose a wink of sleep over it because the department's already seen it and they're already okay with it. And it's one of the services that we were able to provide.
That we submitted to the insurance department for their consideration as the definition, the working definition of renewal, comes out of 3426. And it's intentionally inclusive, which is what we want. We want more stuff to be exempted from disclosure because 3426 is all about protecting renewals. So, but we have not gotten an answer from the department whether they have agreed with us that the 3426 is. But you're going to say 3426 doesn't include non-admitted, but the reg does. So if we got that language transplanted into the reg or into the circular letter guidance for the reg, then we would have a lot of stuff that would be renewals, including maybe even what was mentioned here as far as a new policy number, new BLR, but that definition is any policy that's issued by the same insurer to replace a previous policy from the same insurer.
Yes, I went through them all. I threw 3 of them in the garbage. Then I wouldn't have any inclination to discuss those 3 I threw in the garbage.
100%. And if you got 2 of them on your desk and never even talked about them to the policyholder, then you wouldn't have to disclose on those 2 either. It's what you physically present to your policyholder is when you're triggering. So you say, listen, I got you a quote, but here's 2 other alternatives. You know, then you got to do the primary.
Applications are populated at the time the producer certainly on personal lines and some commercial lines, at the time that the producer's figuring out what the price is.
Yep.
And so they have the application being populated, then they give it the quote to the insured, potential insured, who now says, I want to be covered. And now a formal application has to follow thereafter.
Exactly.
So I'm a little lost.
That's exactly the point that we were talking about, and that is the first use of the application is not really to apply for the policy.
Right.
It's to get the premium.
It's a rating.
And so what we want to define and what we try to define in that, and look at the language and tell me if we're not clear on that, because if we are not, I'd like to change it, or at least to submit a change to it. What we're trying to identify is, we're talking, this is every insurance product out there. It's not just P&C. So they're all bought and sold differently on this thing. But we're trying to define a definitive point in time in the transaction where you decided on a coverage, going back and forth. PIA has met with them, as has a number of other associations out there. And we've participated in public hearings all over the state. We went and participated in working groups. Some of the people around this table actually helped in doing that and crafting the testimony. We've met one-on-one with their insurance counsels on this. We've parsed back and forth and argued about the offensive nature of implementing a regulation on Main Street producers because we didn't do anything to deserve this in the first place. And we argued, you know what, guys, if you want to punish somebody, then punish the big brokers. If you want to put a burden out there in terms of disclosure, don't put it on us. Because we don't design these compensation systems, we just get the compensation. If you want somebody to disclose, then talk to the companies and have the companies disclose. You know, we've argued a number of these points back and forth. Where we are now is, throughout that process, we have influenced the regulation to the extent that now it's finalized and adopted. Do we get everything we wanted out of it? Certainly not. Are we still offended by it, and do we still oppose it? We certainly do. We don't think it's appropriate. We think it's, in fact, it's inappropriate, and we think it's saddled on the